So I was in my studio and I picked up a brush. I started painting a lotus painting, and I paid special attention to the mud around the flower. And that was the beginning of a change in my life because
Mm.
I started painting lotus after lotus, all different kinds. Each time I painted one, I was reinforcing this belief that I could use the pain and suffering of my life to create
Mhm.
something really beautiful.
Mm.
And see, that's what I've done. That's what I'm doing with my life.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of the Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. Are you ready to discover how creativity can literally rewire your brain and become your secret weapon for mental wellness? Well, stick with us because we're going to be exploring how making art from the edge of the bridge isn't just a metaphor. It's a powerful pathway to healing that can actually help entrepreneurs like you move from surviving to thriving. But first, I do want to welcome you to Live, Love, Engage, especially if this is your first time joining us. I am Gloria Grace, founder of Align to Shine Academy, and I empower women over 50 to step into their highest potential with clarity and confidence. And my guest today is an amazing woman. Her name is Meghan Caughey, and she was an artist, and well, still is. She's an artist and cellist from an early age. And but then Meghan developed schizophrenia when she was a freshman in college, but she has recovered and now is a visual artist and assistant professor of psychiatry at Oregon Health and Science University. And I really looking forward to, ever since I met her, to having her join us and talk to us a little bit about her journey and about art and the brain and all this stuff. Just is like I really like. So welcome, Meghan, to Live, Love, Engage.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I'm really happy to be with you today.
Well, I'm really looking forward. Yeah, as I said, I'm looking forward to this discussion because I'd love. Um, I thought we'd actually start, if you can maybe kind of take us back to not exactly the beginning, but maybe when you first discovered that discovered this healing power of art, especially during your journey with schizophrenia.
Okay, well, can I go back even before that?
Sure. I'll let you.
This will date me, but I just will say I have made art all my life, and I come from a family of musicians, and I had a great uncle that was a painter. But when I don't know how many people on this call remember when President Kennedy was shot. I was in elementary school, and I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, and it was awful, and everyone was crying, and it was tragic. And my response was to get a piece of paper and some pencils and draw a picture about it. So even then, I knew that if there was something terrible and awful in our environment, something awful that happened to us, that we didn't know how to handle emotionally or psychologically, that by making a picture about it, that was the way to deal with it. And by the same token, I also, when I was about the same age, I had my uncle Gene, who worked in construction, and he had a terrible accident and had to be in the hospital, and he died. And it was unexpected, and my family was really torn up about it. And my response was to write a poem about it for him. And that way helped me emotionally connect with him. And it was healing for both me and, you know, my mother read it to him, and I don't know if he ever even heard it, but that's just an example of before I even developed this hard to deal with psychiatric illness known as schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia. I was making from early on because it works, because it's powerful.
Yeah, and I love that thank you for sharing that it was already something, shall we say, hardwired into your brain, that you kind of knew intuitively that the way to be able to help heal and even just cope, I think, with certain things, was to be able to express yourself in that way. So what happened when you were diagnosed then, I guess, with, or how then were you able to start kind of, again, I guess, going back to using art to be able to help?
Well, I was 19. I was a freshman in college at a school in Colorado. I went to Colorado not because I thought the school was any good, but because I wanted to be able to go backpacking in the Rockies. So that was my priority. And I got to school, a new freshman, and immediately took off backpacking. And this was the 70s. And then I was going to study art. I had gone back and forth between would my major be cello or visual art, and I decided on visual art. So I was taking an art history class, and one day early on, the art history class was in this big cathedral, big auditorium-like classroom, and I had seats all the way back to the ceiling in the back. I was up by myself on the top row, and when the professor was lecturing about famous artists, I started hearing something very small in the back of my brain. I didn't pay attention to it, but it got louder gradually during the course of the class. And I remember the teacher was showing work by Francesco Goya, if you all are familiar with his paintings. But I started listening more and more because I just couldn't tune it out. And then suddenly I realized that it was saying bad. It was telling me I was bad. It was talking to me and telling me I was bad, and I didn't know what it was. It was awful. And so soon the class was over and the lights came on, and I went running out of the classroom. I went going across the main campus, and there was this other student walking towards me. It was a woman with a blonde hair, blonde ponytail, and a red sweater. And when she got up close to me, I looked at her face, and her face looked like a giant insect.
Oh my goodness.
I was terrified. So I went running to get to my dormitory, went running up to my room. And then when I was in my room, I went to the mirror and I looked at the mirror at myself, and I wasn't myself. I was no longer a young woman. I was a beast with holes for a nose and blood dripping out of my mouth and awful eyes. It was the scariest. I mean, I can't really say how awful it was. And I saw that and I thought my life would never be the same. I knew that on some level that I had changed in a way that I just couldn't explain, couldn't understand. It was terrible. So I went through that year. I mean, when the snows came, this was Colorado, when the first snows came, I'd been having these hallucinations. That's what they were, hallucinations. And I went out when the first snow came, and I was looking up at the snow, and it was such a relief to have the beautiful snow coming down. And some students came and said, you don't have your coat on, you don't have your shoes on, we're taking you to the student health center. They knew I was not doing well. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to upset them, so I went with them. And that was the beginning of being hospitalized many times through my life for the symptoms of schizophrenia and later schizoaffective disorder. So that was when I would see my first psychiatrist and be put on medication for the first time. And that year I stayed in school. I had to drop a lot of my classes, but I went in and out of the student health center. And then later the next year, when my parents came to pick me up, they realized I wasn't doing well. And I ended up being hospitalized for 6 months on Galveston Island in Texas at a big hospital. And that was the beginning of a very long period of my life going in and out of the hospitals. I've been hospitalized over 100 times.
Wow.
But I'm over that now. But it's not like everything is totally simple. But my life has, no one ever thought that I would be able to have a career and a life that has meaning and that I'm respected in my work and I love my life. And yet sometimes things are just better than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. It's an incredible story. How did, and I can't even imagine what it was. It might have even been just accumulation of time, but was there anything that that you see looking back now that helped you to finally start being able to be where you are today? Now you're actually teaching psychiatry, so something had to have shifted somewhere along the line.
Yes. Well, it's not a simple, it's not a simple path. But when I was in high school, before I was even ever diagnosed with schizophrenia, I started studying Buddhism and started meditating. And then later, after I became symptomatic of schizophrenia, I had this kind of real strange life, because on one hand, I was having these terrible hallucinations and mind states. And at the same time, I still was interested in meditating, and it would be hard sometimes, and sometimes I would just hear voices. But also I had a skill set from doing that about dealing with different mind states. So there was a time in my life when I was very unhappy and a lot of emotional pain. I was very suicidal. So I made a number of suicide attempts. And I realized at one point that it was just a matter of time till I was successful. I would get taken to the hospital and be in the ICU or in the psych ward. But at the same time, I was meditating every week nearly that I could with this group of Buddhists, and they were very much into nonviolence. And I was aware of the conflict that here I was doing these violent things to myself. And yet I was practicing, and I had the value of nonviolence. So what to do with that?
Yeah.
So there was a time, where I just realized, okay, if I keep taking overdoses, I'm going to succeed in ending my life. Is that what I want? Is that what is right for me? And I didn't know how I would stop or not do it, but it conflicted with the nonviolence and with my values at the same time. So there was one night where I was awake during the night, and I was walking through the house, and I went to my studio, and I had this contemporary Buddhist magazine, just laid on the chair. I picked it up kind of absentmindedly. I couldn't sleep, and I just my mind was looking for something, obviously. So there was an article in this magazine on lotus flowers, which is a uh, um, of a symbol in Buddhism and in many cultures of beauty and reverence, and they're very special flowers. So I read about mud flowers, which is my name for lotuses. So I read about them, and it said that a lotus is a beautiful flower, but it has to have its roots in the mud in order to bloom and be beautiful. And I read that, and suddenly I just had this realization, oh my goodness, my life has so much mud. I have all this mud, this pain and suffering, all these years of pain and suffering, and that's a lot of mud. And I can be a lotus, and that mud will help me have a really beautiful life because I have a lot of it. So I was in my studio and I picked up a brush. I started painting a lotus painting, and I paid special attention to the mud around the flower. And that was the beginning of a change in my life, because I started painting lotus after lotus, all different kinds, different sizes, different colors, different. I mean, some looked realistic, some didn't, some looked totally abstract. But each time I painted one, I was reinforcing this belief that I could use the pain and suffering of my life to create really beautiful. And see, that's what I've done. That's what I'm doing with my life. So it's
Love
true.
that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And oh, yeah, I'm just like I have a good friend who says God bumps, when and as opposed to goosebumps. But what an amazing story! I love that. So, tell me a little bit about, because I mentioned in the intro that you say something that it's like making art from the edge of the bridge. So what does that mean to you exactly?
Well, in my first memoir, my first book, which is called Mudflower: Surviving Schizophrenia and Suicide Through Art, the end of the book, if you get the book, I recommend people read the book, just because I guess I'm partial. But anyway, at the end of the book, I am forced with needing to support someone that I know who is totally filled with grief and unhappiness and wants to end her life. I lived in Portland, Oregon, and Portland has a big river and lots of bridges through the city to get from one side of the city to the other. And it was in the middle of the night, and my friend that I was trying to support, her boyfriend had died from a fentanyl overdose. And so she had texted me in the middle of the night, said, I have to go be with him. And then I realized, I put the facts together, and I realized that she was talking about ending her life. And see, she was someone I loved. So I figured out she was on the edge of this bridge in Portland, where it's known to be a place where people have sometimes completed suicide. So in the middle of the night, I rushed to her to be with her. And there, at that time, it was, I just had to make the decision. Excuse me. I had to make the decision. Was I going to live? I needed to live to help support her and support people I love and have a life that I love. But I was conflicted. But my belief is that oftentimes the big decisions that we make with our life are like on the edge of the bridge, where it's like if you jump into the bridge, into the river, you're going to die. Or you can stay on the edge, which is not easy, but it can help save someone. It might save you. And I used to tell people, I was working in mental health in Portland. I was a senior director for peer delivered services at a large behavioral health organization. And I would say to people, I would use the story of my getting through schizophrenia and being able to work. I said, you can go through the fire and come out on the other side, because I've done it. You can do it too. Well, when I was on the edge of the bridge, I realized sometimes the point is not to go through the fire and then come out on the other side. Sometimes you just go through the fire, and then there you are in the middle of the fire, and you deal with that. That might be your path, and you can do great good and do service for people and help yourself, even from the middle of the fire. So the book I'm working on now is called Making Art from the Edge of the Bridge, and it takes off from that. But that title is what I'm working on now.
Love it. Well, I look forward to when that comes out. That'll be very powerful, I'm quite sure. So I want to switch gears a little bit now and kind of touch on, what you're doing today, so that, you are an assistant professor of psychiatry. And so I'm curious to know what you know about, like, maybe there's current research or anything that talks about this connection between creativity and brain healing, certainly that you've experienced, but I'm wondering if there's has there been any other, really, concrete data, I guess, might be good to support it.
There is a ton of research and data right now. I can't just throw it off the top of my tongue.
That's okay.
I would recommend, there's a wonderful book called Your Brain on Art by Susan Magnuson and Ivy Ross. Susan Magnuson is a director at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. And this book has all the data that has a great appendix and everything that you need if you want to find research and just get an overview of what's been done. What a lot of people don't realize, I live in Oregon, and Oregon is behind the time when it comes to art and medicine. But there are places in the United States and also in the world where art and medicine just go together. I mean, especially Great Britain and like at Johns Hopkins, where Susan Magnuson is, they have all kinds of research. And it's so making art, whether it's visual art or music or dance or storytelling or going to a symphony, dancing, all of this, it makes changes in the brain, and they are measurable. They are being measured. And so art is now, I mean, this is not every place, but some places people will use art to help treat sort of Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, all kinds of diseases. I mean, often it's dance, like with Parkinson's, people that can't use their legs or talk even. Right. When they're given the chance to dance with music, they can. So and it used to not be that way, but they discovered that, people can actually do that. And it's beautiful. But there's some specific research about how making art, like visual art, actually probably all kinds of art, causes changes with neurotransmitters. Did you know that if you are nervous, if you are having anxiety, and you scribble or make art for about 20 minutes, that the stress hormone in your brain, the cortisol, will come down in about 75% of people. So, I mean, we used to not know that, but some people knew it, had a gut feeling about it, but now the science showing it. Oxytocin, the love hormone, will go up if you make art. And there's a center in our brain where we have the fight or flight. It's called amygdala. It's a little tiny center in the brain, the amygdala. If we get stressed and we're scared, we're panicking, the amygdala will activate and get all busy. But if you make art, the amygdala calms down. So, I mean, these are just a few examples, but the field is really very broad. I mean,
Yeah.
just gives you an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also, and we probably won't really get into this, but I'm just thinking of my my upbringing, and I think not only is art and and any of those different types of modalities are certainly good for mental wellness. I think it also helps with, I think it can help with trauma as well, because
Well, trauma,
because I grew up with, my dad was an alcoholic, but I think the one of the many wonderful things my mom did for me was that she did encourage me. Well, even as a toddler, she got me lots of different little musical instruments to play with, and sort of fostered this love of music in me, and art too, because I remember having little pastel crayons to draw with as well. And then I got into dance when I was like 5 years old, and that was like, I don't know if you've ever seen the musical A Chorus Line. There's this one song at the ballet, and it was like, oh, I could so relate to that, because it was like, yes, everything was better at the ballet. I could leave the drama of home and just be there and be happy. So I don't know if you found that as well with art and that trauma relationship as well.
well, trauma has a footprint in our brain. I mean, trauma is a physical condition. It has to do with neurotransmitters and hormones and things like that. So trauma is describable in scientific terms, and it's possible to watch the effect of art on someone who's traumatized, also someone who has substance use disorder. So these things that we used to think this is just psychological, not physical, like not physical because it's mental. Well, mental has a physical footprint. So it's not like either or.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they go hand in hand. It makes sense.
But the fact that you discovered dance, like when you were 5 years old, I suspect that has served you very well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's still. I mean, and even today, it's like if I'm, because you go through life and things happen, and you're problems come up or whatever, and or you're just in a bad mood for whatever reason. So I will put music on to be able to change my state, and I'm not as although I do like making art. I was actually I helped facilitate a workshop last weekend or the weekend before where the folks made collages, and they were just cutting out pictures and things, and I've done that before myself, and there is something really therapeutic about making something, making a picture of,
Well, dancing is making something.
Yeah.
It's making dance is a form of art.
Yeah.
You have that on a range of different modalities.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So there's lots of things that you can do out there. How did I'm curious about, now you have become a teacher, and you're teaching psychiatry. So how has your own personal experience with mental illness, has that shaped your approach to like teaching and research and things?
I'm glad you asked that. First of all, I love being a psychiatry professor. I love working with medical students and psych residents and things. And I just finished a 8-week class where I was part of a group working with primary care physicians that are rural. And we would do Zoom at like 7:15 in the morning. And these doctors were all over the Pacific Northwest, and they were getting ready to go meet with patients all day. But the topic was suicide prevention. And if you're a rural provider, you are likely to come across people who are thinking of ending their lives, or in great pain, emotional pain and physical pain. So it's a very needed thing to address. So part of my role, well, part of what I want to say is we are seeing in medicine and that there is a greater appreciation of what's called lived experience. So I have lived experience because I had a diagnosis and many years of hospitalizations and treatments and all these things. And I can call on my experiences to train, to talk to. When I give a talk to the public psychiatry training program, which is the program I teach the most at the school where I work, people have not, I mean, people have not talked to someone who has the experiences that I have. I mean, when you have over 100 hospitalizations, that's a lot, even now.
Yeah.
So I'm able to tell people from my lived experience what it's like to have side effects to the medication, or to be totally whatever. It's like I can tell people from a perspective that is very vulnerable and very real.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, people respond. And I use, when I do seminars and presentations, I use my art to illustrate what I'm talking about.
Okay.
If anyone is interested in my art is, I have a website, 𝙤𝙬𝙤𝙬𝙤, and you can look at my art and see a lot of the emotional things that I'm going through. When I graduated from college, I changed my major from art to psychology because I was trying to figure out what was going on with my brain with schizophrenia. And then when I graduated, finally, I was going to become an art therapist. So I went to graduate school briefly in Vermont, and I didn't last very long because I got very symptomatic. But the thing I learned was that there's this thing called free drawings. And free drawings is you don't plan what you're going to draw or paint. You just let your hand move across with the crayon or the paintbrush or whatever, and your unconscious pulls out the image. And learning to do that changed my art, because my art became focused on whatever was coming up in my unconscious, which is a pretty interesting place at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, I'm not an artist. I can't draw a horse that looks like a horse. A lot of people will tell me I can't draw. I can't make art. I'm not an artist. Because when they were in kindergarten, someone named, so Johnny could draw a horse that looked just like a horse. And the teacher said, oh, look at Johnny's horse. Johnny is an artist. And everyone whose horse doesn't look like a horse, whose horse looks like a slug or a snail or a snake, they think, oh, mine doesn't look right, so I'm not an artist. And they go through their lives with that. I get that so often. That's so common.
Mm-hmm.
Making art doesn't have to look a certain way. It's really a process thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's personal. It's what do they say? The expression, the eye is in the beholder or whatever. But it really is personal. And I can relate on the free drawing. I do free writing. So, to journaling, like that, and just kind of journal with, I don't know what I'm going to say, and just kind of see what comes out.
Yes.
And it's the same principle, because you're tapping into that other side, I guess the right side of the brain. That's that more, creative and whatnot.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that.
That's a great example. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah. You're talking about, helping, like other doctors and folks to be able to understand what it's like. based on your experience, what other misconceptions about mental illness and recovery are there that you wish more people understood, especially, just the everyday person as opposed to even a doctor?
Well, I'm not sure what the everyday person is, because everyone has something, and we all have our lives. And lives, we might think our lives are easy and fine, but lives tend to be complicated. So we all go through things, but mental health issues, psychiatric illness, is not an end point. I mean, there is recovery possible, and recovery can look many different ways. My recovery doesn't look like someone else's recovery necessarily, but people can recover and contribute. And so if someone has something that's going on with them that seems psychiatric or mental, and maybe they make art, maybe they don't, but maybe they discover art, some form of art that they love, that can be a pathway to the next thing. There's not just, I mean, people used to think I would never recover. I would never be able to probably be out of the back ward of a hospital. And yet I'm a psychiatry professor and I have a wonderful life, and it's amazing. It wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, when I first decided that I wanted to try working, I was getting treatment at a county mental health program. And I told my doctor I wanted to work.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't worked in many years. He said, "Oh, you're too sick to work." I'll never forget that. You're too sick to work. I thought, I wonder if I can challenge that. And I did.
Good.
When I first went to voc rehab, they said, "Oh, well, you're an artist, so you can work in a frame shop framing other people's art." Well, for some people, that would be a good fit.
Yeah.
But for me, I went to the job interview, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. This is really depressing. I have my own art. I want." So I talked to voc rehab, but I said, I don't want to work in a frame shop. I want to do something. And by that time, I had been I had gone through a clinical trial for a medication that helped me a lot, which was great. And then for the company that made the medication, I was going all over the country giving talks about it, because it was surprising that someone was doing so well. But I wanted to show people that having schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder is not a death sentence or a sentence to being in a hospital all the time necessarily. You can actually have a wonderful life and create and give back. So.
Well, I'm certainly glad you were able to do that. And I think that's important to know. Sometimes I think especially I think even in the climate we're in, sometimes we think that medication isn't helpful, and especially I deal with I'm familiar with a lot of spiritual types who are want to be more holistic, but there is value in some pharmaceuticals. I think you probably learned this, that sometimes you really do need to have something else to help you with the way the brain is working. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I would say it's an individual thing, because sometimes I get the greatest pushback, and I get a real hard time from people who are my peers, because they're angry at psychiatry, and they don't want to consider medication because for them that hasn't been helpful. And I've taken a route where was able to find something that was helpful for me for many years. I can continue taking it past a certain point, but everyone is different. But we really shouldn't judge other people for what path they find for themselves, whether it's with medication or with bowling or dancing, or I don't know. People are amazing. People can find all kinds of things. I think the main thing is that we have faith that it's possible, and we respect each other because we're all different. We're all individuals, and so what works for me, I'm not going to say it's going to work for the next person, but I will do my best to support you and encourage you and love you. And I feel confident that you can recover. And that will look like that will look probably very different than me, but I know a lot of people that will give, that probably for when they know that I'm a psychiatry professor, they think, oh, she's gone to the other side. She's part of the people that we need to get rid of. But because they're angry at psychiatry, and I understand the anger at psychiatry too. But we need to judge each other less and let our freedom to be ourselves reign.
Yeah, definitely. I apply that 100% because we are. That's something that I teach, is that to value your uniqueness and know that even though we are all human beings, but we are all wired differently, and you might have to try different things. I mean, because you also were someone who you were doing art, but then you were also doing meditation, and then you wound up needing more significant help from the medical establishment. So there's as you said, it's a long journey to go through, so you might have to try a few different modalities and different things to find what's going to help you ultimately flip it.
So I would say that's an understatement, because it's not a few things in most cases, it's many things. For me, it was years of trying different drugs, different medications, different things come out, they're new. I'm still probably going to switch to something new in the next month or so. They came on to the market last October, and some people would say, I shouldn't do that, but I will do what I need to make it so that I can flourish and do well. That's all. That's my bottom line.
Well, I think that's something that you definitely want to strive for. Absolutely. So yeah, if you find something better that works, go for it. I'm not going to judge you for that, for sure. So, and no one else should as well. We're getting close to the end, but I do want to ask you this question, because actually I'm going to ask you two things. The first one is, if someone feels like they're out there, standing at the edge of their own bridge right now, what would you recommend that they should do?
Well, if you're standing at the edge of your bridge, see, that's not an easy question, because what we know about people when they're suicidal is that if they're seriously very suicidal, their brains are not working on a normal way or a regular way, that they're feeling like a level of pressure, and things seem so much worse than they would normally seem. So I can't say that there's just a simple do this or do that, but there's a condition called suicidal crisis syndrome. And when people are in that state, they really need to have medical help. And I don't say that lightly, but they need medical help because they're in a physical state that's out of balance and out of whack. But now, if someone, when my friend was standing by the edge of the bridge, my support was just to put my arms around her and hug her and be true to my own life. But sometimes just really, we think we have to do something with someone, but just being present for someone. And people have a right to decide what to do with their lives. Not everyone understands this, but if someone is convinced that they do not belong on this planet, I'm going to have a certain amount of respect for them and that belief. But I will try to get help for them to change their mind, because I want to change their mind. But
Yeah.
a lot of doctors don't realize that ultimately it really is the person's decision.
Sure.
We do our best to save each other, though, don't we?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, because we do have ultimately the ultimate control over what we're going to do with ourselves. But you can, yes, if you know someone who needs some support, definitely at least try to reach out to them first. And
reaching out doesn't mean having all the answers. It just sometimes might mean sitting with someone, letting them either talk or be quiet. I mean, just being quiet with someone. Sometimes being silent with someone and being present is the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about that I didn't? Any other last point you would like to leave our audience with today?
Well, can I tell you one fun thing?
Yes.
I just have to tell you this because I just discovered this yesterday, and I've been telling everyone I can think of. So, do you know what the oldest piece of art in the world is?
No, I don't.
You want to guess? You want to guess how old?
No, I don't know. I've got no clue.
Okay, so it was found in Tibet, High Tibet, and it's 225,000 years old.
Wow.
I mean, that's really before there were a lot of Homo sapiens, but it was fingerprint and footprints in a real playful way. So that's so old. That's much older than what I would have guessed. But with our culture and with our problems in our world today, let's go for longevity.
Absolutely. And make art in whatever way works for you.
Well, my favorite saying that I say all the time is a quote from the German artist Gerhard Richter: "Art is the highest form of hope."
I would love that.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all your wisdom with our audience today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed meeting with you, and I hope that this might be helpful for someone.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Absolutely.
And also, if anyone wants to follow up with me, I have a website, and my memoir has a website. So I'm available if this has brought up anything for anyone.
All right, absolutely, and I will have that. It's your name, Meghan Caughey, and .com, and I will have that in the show notes. And I'm just really concentrating on making sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So I did okay. But yes, I'll have that in the show notes and in the video description for YouTube as well. So not to worry. So again, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I appreciate it, Meghan.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Take care.
And I do want to thank all of you for joining us, and I hope you did receive some value. And if you did, tell a friend, share this episode with someone, and let them listen as well. And if you're not subscribed already on your favorite podcast platform, I hope you will do that too, and or on YouTube. And until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.